are the Beatitudes, just as a reminder. I'll give you a second to read those quickly. So have you ever thought of the Beatitudes as steps of discipleship on a ladder leading to a new life, a life in the kingdom of God? Or were they just a bunch of platitudes that sounded good?
I never thought of them as steps. I thought of them as, well, Beatitudes.
I thought of them as guidelines, but not as a ladder.
Okay. Well, let's go back and look at them just a second again. So here they are. Do you see any progression? If you think of them as steps, do you see progression like you're climbing steps or rungs of a ladder?
Well, I kind of see the first four as directed towards one sort of area, and the last four are actions.
Okay.
But I never really, didn't think of them as progressions. I just thought of them as two sets.
Yeah, the first and second, to me, seem like the ladders with rungs this way, not like this.
Okay.
And I'm still hung up on poor in spirit. I think Jesus could have used better language.
Blame it on the translators.
Okay, the translators.
Blame it on Matthew then. Luke doesn't say that. He just says the poor. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. How do the Beatitudes? Bolton mentions the Alcoholics Anonymous as 12 steps. So how do they compare with that? I'm going to go to the, here's the 12 steps.
Well, the order is all wrong.
Okay, which one?
Well, blessed are those who mourn is number 2. Here is you believe in a higher power.
But do you see any kind of like, there are some similarities.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, because step one, before you can make a change, you have to acknowledge that, well, like in the Anon group, you're powerless over your addicted person, and you can't change the way things are. You just have to learn a new way of maneuvering and
I agree. They're not identical, but there are some issues. There's humility.
Yeah, surrender and trust could be meek.
Yeah.
Blessed are the meek.
So in the 12 steps, you have action steps. The Beatitudes has action steps, but there were some connections. I just thought I'd bring that up. So here's another. There was a book written long ago, 600 CE, by John Mactus.
It is a while back. It's been a few years.
And climax in Greek means ladder. So they also call him John Ladder. But he wrote this book, The Ladder of Divine Ascent, for those practicing, basically for monks in a monastery. And it was supposed to be read with the guidance of the abbot or the spiritual father of the monastery. And it has 30 steps in it. The 30 steps what I read was supposed to kind of be for the 30 years before Jesus got baptized. So anyway, maybe it was just coincidence, but that's what I read. So that you have 30 steps and you begin at the bottom. You can't skip the bottom steps to get to the higher steps. That's a point that he makes in his book.
Well, I think AA's 12 steps would say the same thing. You have to start
Yeah.
and progress through.
So we won't
I
spend
think without step
a lot of
one,
time here, but there's a monastery with an icon in it depicting this ladder, 12th century icon.
Are you okay?
So here's the ladder of divine ascent in this monastery, and Jesus is at the very top of the ladder, welcoming people. The next person, guess who that is?
The guy who wrote the book.
John Climactic. The next guy is the Holy Archbishop Antonio, according to what I read. And then you see people that are climbing, and then there's some people falling off, and there's these little demons or devils that are trying to knock them off.
That's that little one that sits on your shoulder and tells you to do bad things.
I like the guy at the bottom that's feet are sticking up. His head is gone. He gets in a hole.
And you have onlookers as well.
Above and below.
Yeah.
So here are the 30 steps that he had, and they're not in the order of the Beatitudes either, but you can kind of skim through those. I won't ask you to memorize them or anything, but starting off with renunciation, and you gradually, through your, you gradually end up in what they call more the divine virtues. But I will summarize, I found a summary of these steps. You can look at all these, but so the first 4 steps are renunciation of the world and obedience to the spiritual father. 5 through 7, penitence, affliction. 8 through 17, defeating the vices and acquiring virtue. 18 to 26, avoiding the traps of asceticism. And then 27, 29, acquisition. These are getting closer to God all the time. And then the last one is a summary of the whole book. So there's kind of a progression.
I'm glad you pointed out that those steps are defeat of the vices, because I thought lying and slander might have been on the way up to God or something.
I know, that's what I was
Okay.
wondering. Is that something you were supposed to be avoiding or?
Well, that was just
practicing?
the key word I took.
Okay.
Can you go back to the original steps there?
There's a few of them I really can't explain very well. Vainglory, I kind of think is vanity, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Using bodily vigil to attain spiritual vigil. I'm not quite sure what that one is either.
Oh, come on, oversleeping.
There was one, yes, and they're oversleeping. The monks were, I think they had to get up at like 3 o'clock to go say their prayers and, around the clock type thing. So there was,
Yeah, the
Or
hours.
just say, yeah.
and
Yeah.
death was basically what I understood was thinking of each day that you live as your last day. And
What is dispassion? Dispassion.
this passion, I'm not sure.
Passion, I know. Dispassion sounds almost like don't care.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem right.
Maybe
Being emotionally detached, according to AI.
Okay.
Maybe it's
Coolness.
being in control of your passions might be a better suggestion, but
I think of a therapist that
has to distance themselves from their patients just to be able to be effective.
Be objective.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so maybe that kind of thought.
Well, I don't want to spend too much time, so you're kind of aware of this ladder and the steps. So I want to go on back to the Beatitudes. So I could ask, did Jesus practice what he taught in the Beatitudes? Well, it seemed like obvious, yes. So think of the first one. Jesus was poor. Basically, all he owned was the clothes on his back. Now back to the poor in spirit. So this is why Jesus was poor. He always sought to do his Father's will. I don't know if that's exactly what Matthew meant by poor in spirit, but we struggle with that one. So what's the next beatitude? Jesus mourned. I could think of two. Maybe you can think of some others, but one time he wept over Jerusalem, and then at the death of Lazarus, he wept.
Mourned for the ills of the society.
Yeah, I think that was when he wept over Jerusalem.
Yeah.
We think of Jesus meek, and we try not, as we talked about last week, don't think weak and soft and timid, but gentle and humble. So here's a couple things, entering Palm Sunday on a donkey, washing the disciples' feet. What was next?
Those with hunger and thirst.
Righteousness.
Yes.
Well, I think Jesus was right with God and neighbors, and he taught justice in a lot of his parables. So merciful. Remember when he was on the cross? Any other things you want to think about merciful? I mean, stress, purity of heart.
Well, he said last he was without sin for other people.
Yeah. I was
Okay,
thinking that one.
the woman
Oh,
who
yeah.
got adultery. Okay, that's a good one.
Blind man.
And he had battles with scribes and Pharisees over ritual purity. Taught love your neighbor as a peacemaker. And he was persecuted. So far, and I made a mistake last week. I kept referring to this guy who wrote the book. This book I used a lot, which was the Ladder Beatitudes. I kept calling him Foster, but his real name was Jim Forrest.
I pointed that out yesterday.
That's what wives are meant to do.
I'm trying to show the virtue of humility right now.
He was too busy looking at the trees rather than.
So I made a mistake with that. So I've been humbled. Okay, so Forrest asked about the Beatitudes. He says, let's ask ourselves, do I embrace the poverty of spirit or flee from it as fast as possible? For whom have I been in mourning? How meek am I in response to the Gospels? In what ways am I hungry or thirsty for righteousness? How merciful am I regarding those who in some way have done me wrong or done me harm? How pure is my heart and what keeps it impure? So I think that's focusing on, that might be one of those steps where they're talking about steering clear of the vices. In what ways am I attempting or trying to purify my heart? What are the divisions that intersect my life? In what ways am I responding to these divisions as a peacemaker? What enemies do I love? For which enemies am I praying? Whose threatened life am I trying to safeguard? Do I accept persecution as a blessing, or do I try to avoid anything that might get me in trouble? If your response is like mine, you haven't just given yourself a halo.
Mm-hmm.
So Bolton said it's important to realize that the Beatitudes have a destination. So where are the Beatitudes leading us as disciples?
Be more Christ-like.
Okay,
Zion,
Zion.
To create the kingdom of heaven on earth.
Okay, those are all good answers.
To be a good person.
Okay. Well, I'm going to transition now to becoming salt, light, a city on a hill. So that's
There you
chapter 4. So this is the verses in Matthew we're talking about now. Chapter 4, salt, light, a city on a hill. So these are the verses. Anybody want to read those?
off the screen.
Yeah.
You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. The city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven.
So how do you think these verses connect with the Beatitudes that were just preceded these verses in Matthew's gospel?
I didn't realize that they were back to back like that.
Yeah, Beatitudes are like chapter 5, verses 1 through 12.
Like this, if you practice or attempt to incorporate the Beatitude into yourself, you will become a salt, light, and a city on the hill.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, those are qualities you need to do that.
I have when it says you don't light the lamp and then put it under a basket. Well, modern day people do because it's called a lampshade. So,
But it still gives light, it just directs it differently.
it's still covering it up.
Yeah, I was thinking about what the Beatitudes are pointing at and how, I guess, looking broadly, this whole section is kind of, it's not as inward focused, it's more outward. Like,
Okay.
how can you bless the community and get mobilized and,
Yeah.
and you know,
Take those inner qualities and show the world.
yeah.
Well, if you are merciful, you forgive those who make mistakes against you, and if other people see your, I mean, let's face it, we're in a place where everybody blames everybody else and demonizes the other. And if we're willing to say, I disagree with you, but I still love you and I accept you because, you know, you are, I believe in the worth of all people, and people see that, then it's an example, I guess, to those who might be around.
Mhm.
This is kind of how I see at least that one.
Ross, where are you
I've
going?
always been a little bit confused about you are the salt of the earth, but it's salt has lost its taste. I don't quite understand how salt loses its taste, literally. Except maybe if it's mixed in with a whole bunch of other stuff.
Okay. Gets diluted.
Yes, diluted, yeah.
Well, my understanding on that is that in those times, they didn't have pure table salt. They had sort of a mineral mixture, like you said, that had some of the um, well, my chemistry knowledge isn't very good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It had it had a mix of pure salt and like other minerals, and so or gray salts, maybe they would call it. Um, so it's like, oh, this is just sand. At a certain point, I'm just tasting sand. That's no good.
Right.
Anyone else? Well, this is what Bolton said. The attitudes equip us to be witnesses together in practical ways of living God's kingdom and being light, salt, a city on a hill. And I think he's read a reunion text at one time, which was talking about being so. A people shaped by the Beatitudes are to be a signal community of hope, a foretaste of the kingdom. Does any of that ring a bell? So the early Christians in Acts that were in Jerusalem, they were the first signal community. Andrew related in his book some experiences he had in what he called exemplary Christian communities that they're still human, but they were inspiring. So when he was young, just out of college, he was working in Germany for a year, and there was a community. Now Bolton is British.
Hmm.
This is in sometime in the 60s. So it's after the war, World War II. But anyway, he said that they were very kind to him and loving, and they had a lot of. He was young, and they had some young adults there, and he just thought that they were. He called them a city on the hill. And then he and his wife Jewel and their sons Matthew and David lived in what is called the Bruderhof in East Sussex, England, which the Bruderhof is an intentional community where they have all things in common. And they lived there for a year. And from what I've heard him say about it, he thought that was a very powerful experience he had there. And then when he became what they called him, the Peace and Justice Coordinator, back in the 90s, he and his family moved to Harvest Hills, which was an intentional community founded by RLDS people back in the 70s, I believe. And he lived there for, I believe, 20 some years.
I think it started in at least the mid '60s, because we were when we were in college. Roy Brown, or not,
Ed Brown.
Ed Brown was one of the people that were proponents for Harvest Hills, and it was just getting started.
Yeah, Wilford Winholtz was another
Yeah, another one.
key player in that.
So did it function like a commune? I mean,
No,
when you talk, he talks about economic sharing. I was getting the feeling that these were communes.
well, that and the Bruderhof they had all things in common. They had common meals and that type of thing. But Harvest Hills is not a commune. Everybody owns their own house.
Yeah. It's just like it opens to, or their backyard's open to
Commons.
a common area, and people play and garden, all sorts of stuff out there.
Did they share things like lawnmowers and, big expense items so that everybody didn't have to buy a lawnmower, that sort of community?
I'm not sure. I know it was the first people that lived there were mostly, if not all, RLDS people. But I don't know how far they took that concept. Sounds like something that would work, but I don't know if that's what they ended up doing or not.
When I worked in the Argentine area of Kansas City, Kansas, there was a Nazarene group that did more. They each had their own homes, but you had the washing machine and I had the lawnmower, and that was their lifestyle.
And there are intentional communities where they have something like they have a meal together, like maybe 5 times a week, some of them every time, but and then you have your own meals at home for like breakfast and lunch, but you might have the evening meal be shared. And I think they have rotate, cooking responsibilities and stuff like that. So there are different lifestyles besides having nuclear families in each their own house, but so back to salt. The one we're familiar with is table salt, sodium chloride. We use it as seasoning, but in the past, I don't think anybody here uses it as a preservative on their, like when they cure meat and stuff like that anymore. Maybe somebody does, but Bolton came up with another suggestion for another kind of salt. Now, the way the scripture reads, it talks about taste. So I think when my reading would be Jesus was talking about salt that you use to make food taste better. Bolton had this other idea. I'm going to put Dorothy on the spot. What do you think he might have been talking about? And it has to relate to plants. Fertilizer. Okay.
Epsom.
So he talks about wood ash as being rich in potassium chloride and other potassium salts, and he says it's an excellent fertilizer. And I read somewhere it helps plant in fruiting and flowering. It also will raise the soil pH, so you want to be careful how you use it. But he said
ash was used in making soap.
True.
I couldn't hear that.
Ash was used in making soap. Yes.
Soap?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Since it came from plants, it's high in potassium.
So salt is kind of a chemical designator for an element mixed with chloride, one of the other electrolytes mixed with chloride. I'm not sure people in those days would have understood that ash was a salt in the same way that salt, got from the Dead Sea or something and used as a preservative. The other thing about salt is the reason that it loses its flavor over time is it absorbs water. And over a period of about 5 years, it actually dilutes the salt. And so to me, that kind of has meaning, don't let your testimony be diluted or your enthusiasm be diluted, because then your witness won't be as powerful as it might have been.
But it still goes back to losing its taste from dilution. But anyway, Bolton goes on and says, but, and this just fits in with what you're saying, if it's rained on and it gets leached out, then it's not good as fertilizer and thrown out. Well, that kind of fits with Jesus. If it's lost its taste, you throw it out. So, but he says farmers 2,000 years ago using slash and burn, what he called slash and burn farming methods, would have known about the value of wood ash. So, okay, what is potassium salt? Not the sodium chloride version, but potassium salt as a metaphor for a small group of people in society. What might that suggest to you? Maybe I wonder if my question's not clear, but I'm going to ask that anyway.
Well, if it's like fertilizer, it would help the society become stronger in their faith and witness, if I understood the question right.
Well, I kind of went back to this. Potassium helps plants in fruiting and flowering, and thought about what could a small group of people that could they change society to make it
it's happened many times.
flower, to make it
The power of one.
Well, potassium chloride and sodium, calcium chloride melt the ice on your driveway, so it makes it safer.
Makes really good ice cream too.
So you won't slip and
Oh, yeah.
Well, going back to
slip on the ladder.
That's a metaphor.
Going back to Harvest Hills, that was supposed to be sort of a prototype for a Zionic community.
A signal community.
Yeah, and that's kind of a small group of people in society that were trying to do something, you know,
Right.
so like potassium salt in this case.
They were trying to be the signal community, the city on the hill. Well, Jerusalem is a city on a hill. The name, according to Bolton, means city of peace, but it's been destroyed a few times and been through war and destruction. But the prophet Isaiah envisioned a new Jerusalem that would actually be the city of peace. And what's our church seal?
The lamb and the little child's leaping.
So that was kind of a metaphor or a symbol for peace that we use. So back to the Beatitudes, would you agree that the Beatitudes are about creating a new people, to be this new Jerusalem that is a city of peace? Does that make sense?
Or maybe taking old people and making them new.
The best version of ourselves.
Okay.
That thing is anytime you've got a group that does well and exceeds, somebody wants to come and tear it down because they think that they're losing power because these other people are doing well. So
Okay.
you got to be constantly, trying to grow and build to prevent others from feeling that they have to tear it down.
Okay.
It also makes me think, it doesn't take very much salt in a pot of soup.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You can overdo it, right?
to become a new people, you just need a couple of people. You just need a little bit of salt in there, and you can make a difference.
What was it Margaret Mead said? I think it was Margaret Mead. She was a sociologist about it only takes a small group of people to change the world. That's the way it's always been or something like that.
Yeah.
But it also takes the same amount of bad people or salty people to tear down a system.
Well, Margaret Mead also is, digging up bones, which is what anthropologists do. Looking at bones, you can always tell a community that cares for others because you see bones that have healed. They've actually taken care of that person as opposed to they just died of their injuries and were left to, for the wild animals. She said anytime that they found that, they always assumed right away that it was a community that was working together.
Yeah, if you see healed.
Yeah, and they found that in some ancient, like thousands and thousands of years
very
ago.
ancient people.
There was somebody else, Sharon, do you remember her name? Wheatley that said about a community and what they value.
Her first name.
Well, remember what she said though?
Well, a group of people need to figure out what they value most
Right.
and then act on
There's a good example of salt spreading its savor. We went down to Fort Scott, and they have a museum of unsung heroes. And it was started by 3 high school girls. They didn't start the museum, but the end result of it was 3 high school girls had a project. I think they're in Union City, Kansas. Is that sound right?
Arlene's
Yeah.
shaking her head.
Okay. Anyhow, the bottom line, make it short. They went looking for someone that they could see as a hero, and they stumbled upon Irene Sedler, who helped get 2,500 babies and children out of the ghetto in Nazi Germany, and it started with three. The point is, it started with three girls who were doing a high school project, and what happened from that is they've now created a museum. They've written a book called Life in a Jar, and they've created a museum that honors each year people who are unsung heroes. And you can go down to the museum and see exhibits on all those folks. But in every case, it was one person or two people or three people who made a significant change in the world around them. So whatever it's worth.
Usually you have to be very persistent too.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about what people can do individually. Would you agree that the kingdom of God comes through both personal and systemic change?
Yes.
What do we mean by systemic change?
Got to change the system, take down the corrupt and change it.
Yeah. So it could be like you look at a business or corporation and it's like, well, they're doing some really shady stuff as a corporation. But you look at each member, and there may be some exceptions, but you could say, oh, well, he's a pretty nice guy, and she's she's a pretty kind and caring woman. But collectively, you know, they're, there's corruption afoot. But you can't point to any one person. It's just the whole system is misaligned somehow.
Yeah, the system has to be realigned to meet the needs of people. And when it meets the needs of individuals, a small group of individuals, that's not very good. When it meets the needs of all people, that's a far better thing. So I think systematic change is what comes about when you change the system to the point where it is responsive to the citizens, to the people involved, to whomever.
To the common good.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the system has I'll call it counterproductive premise. And it's a system that's supposed to help out, and it doesn't. I'm getting a Park College email right now.
Oh,
To me, that personal change is difficult and systemic change is nearly impossible. But I don't think you can have systemic change unless you have a lot of personal changes first.
Yeah.
That lead to changes in the system.
Why is that?
I just think there just has to be a critical mass of good people, I think. It's like Ryan was saying, it might be the CEO that's to blame or a department manager that's to blame for, corrupt practices in a business. But until you have people that are willing to speak to power and speak up against that, so you've got to have a lot of personal individuals on a personal level, try to make a difference for that one person. Somebody that's got power, it's hard to change that.
So,
You kind of find a way to overthrow it.
so what kind of personal changes would you have to make then?
Well,
Or are there certain qualities that would be needed?
sometimes I think of personal changes, you have to develop the courage to speak up, which is not easy to do. You have to be willing to advocate for others, which is not always easy to do, as opposed to advocating for yourself.
Right.
So I think there are personal changes that are probably required to make systemic change. I'm just saying, I think there's an order of things.
Okay.
To make systemic change happen, and I think the more people that are touched personally, the better chance you have of changing the system.
Well, the system won't change itself automatically. There has to be somebody.
Yeah.
Have to have a lot of buy-in by the participants.
You know, in the news this week is Purdue Pharma, and now that corporation is no more. The perfect example of Brian's corporate greed.
Was that the opioid
That
crisis?
was the only-
I should not think that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So Bolton says creating a changed people was a rigorous process for the early Christians. And for the first 300 years or so, the disciple-making process, which he says to change people's habits and values, often took 3 years or longer before they were baptized. So why so long? No, go back and put yourself back there 2,000 years ago. And why did they have this disciple making process take so long? What do you think?
Almost like an apprenticeship to me.
Yeah.
A lot of it had to be done in secret because they were being persecuted, basically. So they had to hide. And so, you know, it takes a while for somebody to buy in enough of it to put themselves at risk of meeting in private and, you know, going against the established norm.
Well, you were changing, depending on where they came from. If you have a lot of pagans, there's a lot of practices that needed to be, yeah, you had to learn the new, replaced. That's a good word for it.
They had it better than we do. We take 8 years at minimum.
True.
That may have partly come from Judaism too, because Judaism is a non-proselytizing
Yeah.
religion. It's hard to become Jewish. You can't just walk in and say, I want to be Jewish, Rabbi.
Yeah, they reject
We
you.
do that this week at, on Shabbat. You know, you have to go through a lot to become Jewish.
I kind of thought something that Arlene said was one of the things I thought about was with this persecution, you probably want to make sure those people really knew what they were getting into and what they could expect. And that kind of fits in with the 8th and 9th Beatitudes of viewing this persecution and it'd be hard to say rejoice.
Don't you think they viewed baptism as the end product, whereas we view it as a starting point?
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference in the time.
I'm not so convinced about that.
What can I tell you to convince you?
I'm just thinking.
How long will it take?
I'm just thinking about the monks that, you know, maybe they had the two classes. You've got the monks and the nuns are over here, and then there's all the rest of us. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it takes a long time to become a monk and a nun too.
Yeah, but they never, it's kind of a forever process.
Yeah.
I guess is what I was trying to say. They have
To
these
become a
30
full,
steps. It's
to become a full nun, you still have to go through a long process of the
Novitiate.
yeah.
yeah, I don't think it ever ends really. It shouldn't end for us, but that was the initiation, being baptized.
I'd make a really bad nun. I never would be able to just say, yes, whatever you say.
So if you go to seminary, how long a process is that? Is that like a 4-year degree?
2 years.
Two-
Well,
Seminary is, so 3 years here, 2 years now. Yeah.
although if I had to do it again, I'd take a little longer.
Well, but that's to assume a ministerial role. This is just
Yeah.
a membership role, right? We're talking about members coming into the Christian community, had to take 3 years to get ready for that.
Well, I don't want to digress too far, but what happened later in the 4th and 5th centuries?
Well, Constantine.
Okay, Constantine made it an official religion.
Yeah.
He made a political decision. He adopted Christianity because he thought it would help him. But,
And it became imperialized.
right, but it became less dangerous to be a Christian.
Yeah.
So people,
Well, unless you were declared a heretic.
Jim,
Well, Constantine had his faults. He did a couple of bad things, but all in all, he stopped the slaughter of Christians in the arena. He stopped
Mhm.
that, and he pegged Christmas to be December 25th, and that helped. The pagans already had this sun worshiping holiday,
right?
so he integrated. He did it so that they helped convert the pagans to Christianity.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so he tried to do good,
Yeah.
and he did a heck of a lot better than the old other Roman emperors who were
Well,
complete
they also forced people to
degenerates
become
and
Christians.
wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they forced captive people, and they tried the Spanish Inquisition. They tried to force the Jews in Spain to become Christian. That's not converting somebody. That's threatening somebody. And that's not what
Well,
we're talking about.
But once it became an official religion, then basically a lot of people jump on the bandwagon, so to speak, and
To live.
they,
Yeah.
well, it was no longer being persecuted, but I just kind of wonder if they had this flood of influx of people wanting to become Christian, and they shortened the process. So in like the 5th century, I think infant baptism was brought about.
Yeah, it says the internet.com says that the early church adopted infant baptism or first mentioned it around the 2nd to 3rd century. Around the time of can't say it.
Tertullian.
Yeah. And then it really strengthened in the Middle Ages. So.
When did they start believing in original sin? Because it seems like the two were somehow
About the 5th century with Augustine.
5th century.
Mm.
I think he was in the 400s.
Well, anytime you make a religion kind of the state religion, you kind of have to figure out how to get people to agree to it, and that's where the threatening and the oh, you're going to be baptized or you're going to die. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll be a Christian, sure.
Well, it was pre-official. I think after it became official, there was no threat. So how were early Christians salt, light? This is, Bolton says, they fed the poor, cared for orphans, looked after old slaves and prisoners, buried the dead with dignity, no matter how poor they were. And they even nursed the sick, whether they were pagan or Christian, in the plague, which that might be almost like a death sentence if you were hanging around people that had plague.
Yeah.
So there was this Christian teacher, Lactantius or something like that. We teach, we show, we demonstrate. So the kingdom of God comes by being a demonstration community of Jesus' teaching. So that demonstration community, signal community, kind of the same concept.
Walk your talk.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of this? Bolton says the kingdom of God has first to be imagined before it can be. What do you think?
Can anything be without being first a thought?
Okay.
Where there is no vision, the people perish. Somebody said that.
Intention?
Intention.
Yeah.
That's kind of a basic principle of life. If you can't imagine it, you'll never get there. Whether it's a degree you're after or building a house or being a Christian or whatever.
Yeah, my basic thought is that Kind of self-evident and basically comes up in the term duh.
Yeah.
What did Gandhi, do you remember what Gandhi said, Paul, about
Who said?
Gandhi?
Oh,
He had something like that.
be the change you,
Right.
be the change you want to see.
Something
Be
like
the
that.
change you want to see,
I think that's what it was. Be the change you want to see was what Gandhi said. So that's,
This church had such a vision of Zion for so many years, we had, that imagination.
Mhm.
And then we don't so much talk about it maybe, but I think we're more in the process of trying to, make it happen now. Especially with the peace initiatives in the church. But I think we imagined it for a long time.
Mhm.
And that vision has become broader too. It's not just
Yeah,
a sheltered community, it's a world.
right, exactly.
why would imagining a better world be a subversive, repentant act in our society?
Well, I would say it's subversive because you're overthrowing it's all about me and what I can get, and being more about everyone should have a good life, and they should not be, just a subsistence living where they just barely get by.
You think the 1% would like that?
No, that's why it's subversive.
Okay. There might be resistance.
Yeah, I think a lot.
Well, what kind of questions should we be asking ourselves in trying to imagine a better world?
Well, first thing you gotta do is figure out what's wrong with the current world
Nothing.
and then figure out the steps to take to improve it.
Okay.
So you have, the ultimate question is, what are we gonna change?
I think one question we should ask, do we really believe in the worth of all persons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we really believe?
Jim?
We must be realistic, please. We need to stop people like Vladimir Putin, who's just exactly like Ivan the Terrible, Joe Stalin. Okay, he's no different. He's a cold-blooded killer, and he's killing women and children, bombing apartment buildings in Ukraine. And that's why we have a military. That's why other countries should try to defend themselves as a military to stop people like that. But the United Nations, the people who run the United Nations, are a bunch of cowards. And they won't do anything to stop Putin. So the only solution is the return of Jesus Christ to establish his kingdom here on earth. I've got to go take care of the coffee clutch.
All right.
Are we,
I think in imagining a better world, you have to have a pretty good definition of what better looks like. And I think that's maybe going back to the Beatitudes and using that as sort of a framework for what better might be.
okay? Well,
Yeah, and who's better are we looking, or
Yeah.
are we following? Cause,
Is it the better of the 1%?
yeah. Cause everybody's better is different.
Athletes do a visualization exercise. And one of the things of it is very specific. If I'm throwing the shot put, I'm looking at every action in that
okay.
shot put. And, is our vision critical enough that we are looking at something specific that we can change? Or are we just saying, I want to change the world?
So
But do I want to have everyone have enough food on their table? What is my something?
okay.
That's what I do playing golf. I visualize the ball going right down the middle of the fairway and then hit it into the woods.
You didn't visualize.
Did you visualize your swing?
Then I visualize myself.
I visualize where the ball is going so I can go find it.
But just imagine where your ball would go if you didn't visualize. So, well, it's getting closer.
Do that next time.
Probably still be on the tee.
They suggest that, when you want to accomplish something, to make a visualization board so that you can, decide different steps of how you want things to be or what you want to change and to help make change.
And you can go back to the board multiple times and be like, well, this didn't work, so let's try this.
Okay.
I think it gets really exciting when you get God involved. When you get God, ask God, is this what you want? Do you have a different plan in mind? Probably does have a different plan. And then get ready, because that last question is very important. What are you willing to work for and sacrifice for? It may require, if you're going to say yes to this one thing, you're going to have to say no to all these other things. And that's about priorities, which is hard for me, I will say. But if God is behind it, all right, how can I help? Make it happen.
Well, you can leave with this question. What would it mean to practice prophetic imagination in our neighborhood? Jay runs contributions and participation. Next week, I did have a prayer thought. He had this in his book. God beyond imagination, help me imagine a better world and follow your way. Give me courage to be salt, light, part of a city on a hill. Help me see your kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. May this possibility be right in my soul. Give me ears to hear your call and the strength to live it with others. Amen. So next week, chapter 5, Paul leads the discussion on Jesus affirms the law and the prophets.
So we'll just do the one chapter. I'm not going to try to do two chapters. So think about what you know about the Mosaic Law. That's your assignment for the week. And then the second part of your assignment was, what does a prophet do?